This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire, and on today's edition of the Paul McGuire Report, this is one of the most important Paul McGuire reports that we have done since we started this radio program, this version of the radio program. Now, on November 4th, there is going to be synergy of various activist groups, most likely financed by the same financiers. And those radical activist groups are groups like the MS-13 street drug gang that is among the most violent gang in the world from South America, ISIS, the terrorist group, Antifa, another activist group, and there will be many other groups joining in with them. And the game plan is to have riots and demonstrations at major cities and areas across the United States of America. Now, it doesn't stop there. This game plan is highly organized. The people that you think are organizing it are not. They are lower level players. They are, they're not at the top of the pyramid. Let's just put it that way. They're lower level players. The people that are really behind it consist of a congruence of highly sophisticated activists, radical activists that are highly trained, that have decades of experience, that most likely interface with some intelligence agencies and law enforcement and media, mainstream media. They have unlimited financing. They are highly trained. You have people that are like, quote, in-depth psychologists, which is a specialty field within the branch of psychology, which looks at core personalities or core elements in people's personalities, and then devises a plan to bond with those individuals and recruit those individuals on a deep psychological level and transform them 180 degrees into radical activists. You see, the creation of radical activists is not a haphazard, accidental process. The creation of radical activists, whether it's religious radical activists or gang member radical activists or political radical activists, or whatever the nature of the radical activist is, this is a process that has been highly developed through what is called scientific mind control that began to reach its pinnacle after World War II, when the U.S. government and the CIA brought in, during a clandestine operation called Operation Paperclip, we brought in 10,000 Nazi rocket scientists into the United States of America. But among the 10,000 Nazi rocket scientists, we brought in thousands and thousands of mind control scientists, and we brought in thousands and thousands of genetic scientists. And some of these scientists, like Wernher von Braun, who was the German Nazi rocket scientist that developed NASA, he had dual functions. He was both a rocket scientist and a mind control scientist. And so a highly sophisticated operation began, and a lot of it has been declassified. The CIA has declassified a lot of the documents. And on top of that, I mean, just about every, intelligence, thriller, movie, episodic television show is making continual references to the MK Ultra Manchurian Candidate programs. Not directly, but what they're doing is They are communicating the reality. Episodic television writers and producers and directors and feature filmmakers are continually releasing films where the hero, either male or female, is the product of some kind of special top secret military program where they had their abilities enhanced and they became super soldiers. Now, they never describe to you exactly how they become super soldiers, but it is always alluded to in the script, and it is alluded to by the performance of the particular actor or actress. They performed their duties as a cop or as an investigator or as an intelligence officer at almost a superhuman level of performance and skill. So they don't let the cat out of the bag. They're not telling you exactly how they got them into this superhuman status. But what they're doing is they're making a definite oblique reference to the Manchurian Candidate program, the Operation Paperclip, and the MK Ultra program began by the Nazis, where they created super soldiers and they programmed people to be assassins, spies, and so on and so forth. They don't tell you the secret sauce recipe, but they are repetitively and incrementally, and that's how the process always works, by the way. Whenever you're dealing with social engineering, mind control, persuasion, or something of that nature, what you have is a process called repetition. So if you are repetitively releasing information about the existence and the reality of super soldiers, super spies, etc., people become acclimatized to it, if you will. They become used to it. They don't question it, and that's the goal. I was watching, every time I turn on a new cop series, investigator series, or whatever series, every time I turn one on, it's always about a super soldier, a enhanced assassin, an enhanced spy that has almost superpowers, but those powers were brought about by scientific mind control and conditioning. Now, I can't remember the name of the show that I saw last night. I'd never seen it before. But it was like, I cannot tell you how many of these shows with these themes I've seen just in the last 2 months alone. They've always been there. I mean, you take The Bourne Identity. The Bourne Identity is all about training a super soldier through LSD, shock, trauma, hypnosis, drugs like LSD. It's based on a real program, the MK Ultra Manchurian Candidate program. And then in the initial movies, Jason Bourne, or whoever his latest replacement is as an actor, is able to perform as a super soldier. That means they can go for long periods of time without sleep. They can endure a phenomenal amount of physical pain. They can maintain focus, concentration, and strength that is superhuman. They have analytical abilities that are like, it's like they've been genetically modified and they're like Supermen. They can walk into a room and they can size up a potential attack, where the bullets will be flying, where the bad guy will be standing, what they need to do, how many seconds it will take. And it's one movie after another that reveals this truism about super soldiers or Manchurian candidates. So you have the actual movie, The Manchurian Candidate, with I forgot his name. I spaced out. There's two movies. The first one with Frank Sinatra was called The Manchurian Candidate. It's the better of the two movies. And then Denzel Washington played a very good role in the sequel about LSD programming mind control assassins. Now, the other thing is you have movies like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which deal with that. You have numerous movies with female super spies that don't feel pain. They can stay up for days at a time. I mean, they're just churning out one movie, one episodic TV show after another. And I haven't even touched the iceberg. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It has now become a staple in the movie business and in episodic television. It has become a staple to depict these super soldiers. And you look at Denzel Washington in this particular movie, which I can't remember the name of. It wasn't the Manchurian Candidate. He plays a drifter who had a problem with the military, which is often the role they write. And he sees this young girl, a teenage girl, who is a prostitute for the Russian mob. And he feels sorry for her. And even though he has left the world of espionage and taken a crummy day job, he has compassion for this girl, and he uses his super soldier enhanced status to combat, the toughest people in the Russian mob. And the way the writers and the producers and the directors indicate that is that he can go into a room with a bunch of Russian mobsters and he can take them all out, not because he has superpowers, because he has heightened perception. He knows what they're going to do before they do it. And in a sense, he's a super soldier. And there are so many movies that carry this theme just continually, and so many episodics that carry this theme. And why is that? Well, one is it's fascinating to watch, okay? It's a fascinating genre of spy thrillers. When you go back to the early films, once upon a time, not that long ago, this subject was somewhat taboo. There were only a couple of films that really dared to deal with it. And one was The Manchurian Candidate, and another was a movie with Mel Gibson called Conspiracy Theory. And what that movie was all about, if you saw it, you know what I'm talking about. It was all about a cab driver, played by Mel Gibson, I think in New York City, who everybody thought was a nut. Everybody wrote Mel Gibson, the cab driver, off as a nutty conspiracy theory guy that shouldn't be taken seriously. And so this movie was made, 20 years ago. But Mel Gibson published this obscure paper newsletter exposing various conspiracy theories. And he had just a tiny amount of subscribers because this was before the internet when this movie was made. So he had 15 people on his list, okay? And then he has a heroine, I forgot her name, a famous actress who takes him seriously and gets him out of trouble. Well, he accidentally predicts something that the intelligence agencies are really going to do. And the implication is that the reason Mel Gibson knows so much about super soldiers, Manchurian candidates, and conspiracy theories is that he actually lived through it himself. In other words, the screenplay writer indicates that Mel Gibson himself at one time went through that brutal, torturous process of being broken apart and reassembled together to become a enhanced super soldier, like MK Ultra, like a Manchurian Candidate. And he doesn't remember it, of course, because part of the super soldier program is they'll use huge amounts of electrical voltage to create amnesia walls where you cannot access your primary programming. You can't even remember your primary programming, or who you are, or what you went through. So in this movie Conspiracy Theory, they're after him big time. And the female lawyer helps him. And then they are chasing him. And the guy from the second Star Trek series, I forgot his name. He's got a bald head. That's all I know. Sorry. And he plays this doctor, this neuropsychiatrist. And the implication is that Mel Gibson is one of his creations, that this doctor is kind of an evil doctor. He's a neuropsychiatrist, and you're led to believe he was a key scientist in the implementation of the super soldier program, and Mel Gibson became one of his mind-controlled super soldiers. Okay, so Mel Gibson escapes them. They're tracking him down because they're terrified, and this is a plausible plot, that he's going to crack, okay, mentally, and if he cracks, then he will reveal the facts surrounding his programming and the mind control he went through and how he was programmed to be a super soldier. And the CIA, or whatever the intelligence agency is that's pursuing him, doesn't want that to go public. So Mel Gibson hides in this giant warehouse, and it's a closed down hospital, and it's very near Manhattan Island. In fact, I forgot the name of the island. I'm from New York. I should know the name of the island. You have Manhattan Island, and you have Queens, and then you have these small islands in between Manhattan and Queens. Is it Roosevelt Island or something? Okay, so this closed down hospital exists on this island between Queens and Manhattan, and it's all a wreck. You know, the windows are all crashed in. But this used to be a secret government mind control facility where they programmed Mel Gibson. And when he's fighting with this neuropsychiatrist, he starts to remember what they did to him. And they traumatized him and they tortured him, because that's part of mind control, and gave him drugs. And somehow he recalls what they did to him, and they're prosecuted, etc. Now, this sounds far-fetched, but it isn't, because as I have explained to you on a number of recent editions of the Paul McGuire Report, the basic formula for scientific mind control is shock, pain, drugs, and hypnosis. Now, the pain can be psychological pain. It can be trauma, psychological trauma, like watching your mother get shot in front of your face. No, I'm serious. Whether it's rehearsed or whether they do it for real, who knows? But that's the kind of trauma they put on people to crack them so they can program them. And then they give them powerful drugs like LSD and other psychedelic drugs to program them. And then they hypnotize them through sleep deprivation and repetition and chips and all kinds of things. In fact, I think Mel Gibson has a chip in this movie. And pain, drugs, hypnosis is the essential formula for mind control. Now, why this is important is that the scientific mind control that developed the Manchurian Candidate program and MK Ultra, where they used LSD, was developed by the Nazi scientists at the end of World War II. We, at the end of World War II, brought in 10,000 Nazi scientists into the United States to continue this mind control programming. And you have to understand that this is a science, and it is not a sloppy science. Since it first began in the 1940s, it has evolved. It is more efficient. It is more precise. There are less accidents. Now, the official story is, after a congressional hearing in which Senator Ted Kennedy presided over the hearings, the official story was they stopped the MK Ultra program. I don't know if they did or not. I have no idea. I'm not privy to that. But then, in fact, when Kennedy asked the head of the CIA, he got very angry at Kennedy and said, "We stopped that." But then they asked one of the heads of the CIA kind of a trick question, which is, did you stop the monarch mind control program? Because just because you stopped the MK Ultra program doesn't mean that you stopped the more advanced program that came along afterwards, which is called monarch mind control. Now, in my book, Conquering the Matrix, I deal with this entire subject, and you need to understand the entire subject. I deal with it in a way that is not intended to be like spooky and freak you out, but you do have to come to grips with reality so that you can protect yourself and so that you can understand how the same principles that are used in individual mind control can be used in mass mind control, okay? And once you understand that, you understand that it's possible to program a nation just as efficiently as you program an individual. And that is what I educate people about in a fast-moving way in Conquering the Matrix. Conquering the Matrix deals with a lot more than just scientific mind control, but it deals with that heavily because your average person is clueless to the reality of scientific mind control. And as such, they're clueless to the reality that they're being manipulated. Their beliefs are being implanted into their personalities without them knowing it. They're being conditioned and they're being programmed. And they don't even have a clue that it's happening. And it's important to explain on a mass level at least the basic dynamics or the basic procedures involved in scientific mind control so that the average person will recognize at least the basics when they're being used, when those techniques are being used upon them or a nation, and how to guard yourself and protect yourself both individually and personally to succumbing to scientific mind control. Because Jesus Christ said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." What that means is that when you know the truth of Jesus Christ and you're born again by faith, you will be set free. Why? Because the Holy Spirit takes up residence inside you. Your mind is renewed by the Word of God. Now, if you allow your mind to be saturated with false teaching and false prophecy and repetition, which is a form of hypnosis is a form of sorcery, you can be seduced back into spiritual error, and you can be seduced into accepting a false reality. This global false reality is what I call, and others call, the Matrix. And that's why the title of my book is Conquering the Matrix, because it deals with this construction through the media and the internet, etc., of a globalized artificial reality, a globalized virtual reality, which is called the Matrix. It's an artificial reality. Because it's artificial, it's based on a lie. And it very much interplays with Mystery Babylon, because Mystery Babylon is all about the creation of an artificial reality. Now, all of this is just the initial overture to some very important facts. We are now seeing in our media an acceleration of these, I call them theatrical productions, events that keep happening. The Vegas mass shooting, this, that, the other, you know what these things are. And they're coming with increasing frequency. And they all are designed to shock, to disrupt. Now, let's remember, a primary part of the formula of mind control is shock, awe, trauma. So all these events that people are watching on television produce a psychological state of shock, awe, and trauma. Okay? Number two is, you say, well, the third part of scientific mind control is the introduction or the usage of LSD or other powerful psychedelic drugs. So you say, well, you know, there's no, Paul, you're off base here, because you're talking about these events that happen, but there's no evidence to prove that drugs like LSD or other mind-altering substances are being used either on the individuals involved or the mass population in order to brainwash them. There's no evidence of mind-altering drugs. Well, just hold that thought for a moment. The final part of the programming process is hypnosis. Hypnosis is inducing what psychologists call a dissociative state, a trance state, a mild hypnotic state. This is very important because in the sequence of events that scientific mind control requires, you have shock, trauma, something that just shakes people to their very core. Then you have the usage of mind control drugs. And then you program people. You program them by placing them in a hypnotic state or a dissociative state. And the reason for that is, or a trance state, the reason for that is that the human being can receive programming, commands, all kinds of things when they're in a dissociative state or a trance state or even a mild hypnotic state. The hypnotic commands, the hypnotic identity, the hypnotic mission, or whatever it is you're trying to program the person with, bypasses the conscious mind and goes directly into the subconscious mind. So a person is not even aware that they're being programmed, because the programming is hypnotic. It bypasses the conscious mind, goes right into the subconscious mind, and there it takes root, and then it can be activated with trigger words or whatever. But the point is that the person in their conscious mind is unable to remember that they were programmed or they were hypnotized. And there's variations of this. So let's look at some basic dynamics of this. And the reason for doing this, this is not like an exercise in, some non-important subject. You cannot be prepared personally or spiritually or collectively for the events that are coming to America, probably starting November 4th. Don't hold me to the date, because they may delay the date. There's going to be a series of events that could loosely be called manufactured crisis, involving Antifa, ISIS, MS-13, and other radical groups. The purpose of these events will be to cause manufactured crisis or manufactured chaos. Manufactured crisis or manufactured chaos is one way of completing the essential formula of scientific mind control, which is pain, shock, trauma due to the manufactured crisis. You can have an individual manufactured crisis, or you can have a collective manufactured crisis. Let me give you an illustration. Because you see, in order for you to fulfill God's plan for your life, in order for the Church of Jesus Christ to be the Church of Jesus Christ in the last days, in order for the Church of Jesus Christ to be supernaturally equipped by the Holy Spirit and by Jesus Christ to fulfill its mission in the last days, it has to learn how to overcome these theatrical events that are designed to implement sorcery, if you will. What we're really talking about is a modern version of sorcery or magic. That's exactly what it is. Scientific mind control is nothing more than an updated version of sorcery. And we need to be aware of it so that we can accomplish the mission individually and as the church and collectively that God has called us to accomplish before the foundation of the world. But we can't do it if we don't understand how the full armor of God is applicable to this. And that's why I have to constantly remind our listeners. Most of you know, but we interact with Christians where many of the ideas that you and I talk about on a daily basis, we're all up to speed, but we interact with a larger body of Christians that are clueless to what's going on. Therefore, because they're clueless, they're going to be victims. And so we have to understand these basic principles in order for us to be victorious. That's why I'm doing everything in my power to educate people as fast as I can. That's why I wrote the book Conquering the Matrix, because it simply explains a very important subject. And every Christian should read the book and have a basic understanding of what it says. The same with A Prophecy of the Future of America, and the same with the brand new book with completely new information, A Prophecy of the Future of America 2016-2017, and Mass Awakening, and a book we have coming out in January that is going to, we can't release all the plans that are going along with it, but it's called Trumpocalypse, and it's been written with my co-author Troy Anderson, and there's a method to our madness. Let's just put it that way. So I want to go over this, because if you grasp this, and you don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to get it. Anybody can understand it. Look, let me tell you something. Everything that I'm talking to you about now, in one way or another, they are in the scripts of all the major motion pictures that your kids and adults and teenagers are watching today. The Captain America movies all talk about MK Ultra programming, mind control, Nazi mind control, Nazi genetic engineering. Just look carefully at the plot of the Captain America movies. The writer is explaining everything that I'm explaining to you in a fictional content, and your kids are getting it on a subconscious level. The same way with the X-Men. The X-Men are genetic mutations. It's all about transhumanism. And there are many other science fiction movies or action adventure movies like Iron Man, like Westward, which is vulgar and crude and pornographic, so I don't recommend it. But it's dealing with these realities. Our kids and the media is flooding people with information about these kinds of topics. And you know why they're doing that? Because they're trying to desensitize people. They know there are the invisible elite powers that control this world. They know that hundreds of millions of people are now learning about and know about, to varying degrees, the kinds of things that I've been talking to you about for decades, like scientific mind control, etc. So So in order to deal with it, they're very sophisticated. They don't hide it. They actually are desensitizing the population because they allow and create an escape valve for these realities. And all this stuff is explained in a subtle, low-key, with laughs, action, adventure, and entertainment in movies like Captain America and Iron Man and all the other movies, Spider-Man. All this stuff is explained. Okay? If you pay attention to the script, you know, when I wrote the book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, and let me give you a piece of advice about writing books. I'm laughing. I'm laughing because it just happens to be the truth. I'm not usually so candid. So take advantage of it. I'll probably regret it later. When I began writing books decades ago, and in the last 20 years, I began to realize, especially with the proliferation of the internet, that the books I wrote and the contents in the books that I wrote were often cutting edge. Nobody else was really writing about them. At the time I published the books, okay? Nobody else was really writing on this material the way I was writing on it. Well, a year later, and 2 years later, but I'm talking about just a year later to 2 years later, I am seeing topics that I've written about, which were just the year before I wrote them, obscure topics that nobody knew anything about. Now they're in all kinds of prophecy books. In fact, they're everywhere. And, you know, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But the point is that everything is moving so quickly because of the internet. Any writer, not just me, any writer who writes stuff that's breakthrough, cutting edge stuff, a year later, there'll be 100 other writers writing about it. And so you really can't do anything about it. You can't succumb to being petty and jealous and stuff. The only thing you can do is communicate the message God told you to communicate. Thank God other people are doing it. And the only way you can be effective is to stay ahead of the game. Now that means you're going to take the most heat, but you stay ahead of the game. Not because of ego. That's not the goal. If staying ahead of the game is all about your ego, well, guess what? God will yank you out of the game. But you're staying ahead of the game because everything is moving so quickly. So back to this desensitization. So very powerful groups in our society realized they could no longer keep the lid covered on MK Ultra, scientific mind control, and all the rest of that stuff, Manchurian candidates. So what they did is they flooded big budget entertainment movies with those themes. And the kids and adults are receiving all kinds of information, and scientific mind control, pain, drugs, hypnosis, and all the stuff that goes with it is now the new normal. People are not consciously aware of it, but it is all throughout the screenplays on the biggest films and biggest television shows that are being produced today. So the secondary effect of all this is it causes people to be desensitized to it, which means it causes people, it acts as a form, listen very carefully, this is an important concept, you see, if they use the strategy of attempting to hide what people knew, they would lose. So they're quite clever. So what they do is they release the information, they disseminate the information, and by disseminating it and releasing it, they desensitize people to it. So it's a process of gradualism. Without people even realizing it, they begin to subconsciously accept the idea of mind-controlled, drug-enhanced super soldiers as a new norm. And nobody thinks anything about it. teenagers and young people talk about it, ha ha ha, and it's considered funny. But man, 5 years ago, there were a handful of shows that dealt with it. Today, there are probably 100 shows that deal with this once highly classified theme that you wouldn't dare touch, or you might not be alive. We're going to be back in a moment. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. You need to grab yourself a copy of Conquering the Matrix. I'm serious, because we will run out of the first printing very soon. If you have pre-ordered the book, your package is set aside. Your name is already printed out, and you will receive your copy in order of the time frame that the first people that ordered it are the first to get it shipped. But we'll have the whole process of shipment probably about 2 to 3 weeks. Everybody who pre-ordered, depending when you ordered it, will receive it in the mail, priority mail, if you live in the U.S. Now, if it's a day later than that or 4 days later than that, just please be patient, because your name already is on a package. We know who you are. I know who you are, because I even did it today. I forced myself, just so you know, I forced myself to look at every envelope that comes into our ministry, every order, every prayer request, every contribution. I force myself to look at every name, and I try to glance to get an idea of where people live. Now, the reason I do that is because I feel a spiritual responsibility that I need to stay in touch. I need to actually know who I'm ministering to, who I'm reaching. So that those of you listening are not just some obscure, nameless names out there. I know who you are intentionally. And also what I do, which is something I want you to know, even though sometimes it's inconvenient, I try to force myself. I'm not saying I do it every time, but I do it a lot. When I get a lot of envelopes coming into the ministry, I force myself to look at the names. So, of course, I know the people who are writing and donating and praying on a regular basis, and new names. But I also discipline myself to say a brief prayer over the names of every individual or every family or every married couple or every person who contacts this ministry to make an order, to make a donation or a contribution, or just to share a prayer request or a testimony. I make a dedicated effort to personally pray over each and every name. And I do it instantaneously at the exact same time I see the name. And the reason for that is I learned a long time ago, if I don't pray for you immediately, okay, and I hate when people do this to me. I am just telling you flat out. I hate when people tell me they're praying for me and they don't pray for me. I mean, I really don't know if they're praying for me or not, so I can't judge anybody. But it really bugs me to think that if I'm saying I need prayer and people go, oh, I'll pray for you, brother, that they forgot. It bugs me. I don't think it has integrity. Now, I'm not any better than anybody else, so I'm potentially guilty of doing the same thing. So the only way I figured out that I could actually have integrity and actually keep my word when I say to people, I'm going to pray for you, or when I say to people who contact this ministry, I'm going to pray for you, is I develop the discipline that when I actually see your name or your family name or whatever and your address, for whatever reason, you're making an order, you're making a donation, you're sending in a prayer request, you're sending me some information, whatever it is, however I see your name, at that moment, whether mail's going in or mail's going out, I deliberately look through and observe the name, where you live, and I instantly pray a prayer over every single correspondence when it goes through my hands, okay? And I want you to know that, because I'm serious about the fact that when I say, or we say that we're going to pray for you, I am completely serious about that. Okay? And know that I can't say to you, I hit the mark 100%, but I certainly try. Okay? And I want you to know what the discipline I put on myself is, that when I see your name and your address, that's when I pray for you. I don't wait, because you know what happens when you wait? I'll never pray for you. That's why when I get an email from people, I don't always answer it, because that takes a lot of time. But it's a crisis email. My webmaster makes sure I get, she makes sure I get these crisis prayer requests and stuff. And many times I just see them anyway. But I make it a discipline to pray at that moment for your crisis. The second I see your email, and it could be somebody dying or emergency prayer or whatever it is, the minute I read your email, I pray right then and there for your crisis situation or whatever it is. And the reason for that is that that's the only way I can be sure that I'm going to be faithful to keep my commitment. Because, human nature is what it is. We're all off to something an hour later, and I could easily forget. So these are the disciplines I put upon myself. And I know I'm being long-winded, because I want you to know that I really care and I really pray. And I don't want to, not that I am not better than anybody else. Believe me, I'm painfully aware of that. If I'm not painfully aware of it, God raises up a whole lot of people in my life to remind me of it. So, but the one thing I don't want to be guilty of is what people have done to me when they say, "Oh, I'll pray for you." And you get the feeling that they never prayed for you. Well, when people say they need prayer, they need prayer. I understand that. So that's why I pray for you then. Because if you say you need prayer, you wouldn't be writing me if you didn't need prayer. There must be something urgent going on. So I just want you to know that that's a commitment that I try to keep 100%. All right, you're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. Visit paulmcguire.us right now, paulmcguire.us. You can get a copy of Conquering the Matrix. Also, you'll see a really nice chart with visuals that Susan, our webmaster, created. Part 1, Emergency Apocalyptic Alert for America. Part 2, Alert for America. And all these other special programs dealing with vital, absolutely vital things happening in our nation. And we're trying to raise, right now, my goal is to raise up as many people as possible, as fast as possible, to become effective intercessory prayer warriors. Because look, I'm just gonna lay it flat out to you. I've said it in every emergency alert, and this program is going to be emergency alert too. Why? Because we're in a state of spiritual emergency. So I have part 1, part 2. Today will probably be part 3 of an emergency alert. Why? Because I've been called to be a watchman on the wall. And the watchman's job, when he sees the enemy coming from a distance, and the desire of the enemy is to slaughter the people of God, the faithful watchman must get up on the watchtower and blow the shofar or the trumpet, giving God's people a time to get their act together and properly defend themselves from the attack. And as a watchman on the wall, and there are many other faithful watchmen on the wall, I'm not claiming to be the only one, they're blowing the trumpet. And I'm telling you right now, November 4th could potentially be a very, very dangerous date for this country. Now, please don't overly lock into November 4th, because they may delay their plans and not go operational into months afterwards. But right now, their target date is November 4th. We don't fall asleep if they move their target date. And they are announcing a series of manufactured crises, along with a very demonic baiting of conservatives, Christians, people who love America. They're trying to bait them into engaging and responding with violence and physical engagement so that their covert agents can cause violent acts to happen, and the conservatives and the Christians will be blamed, and then things totally get out of control, and then they can create martial law, which is a police state. Don't think that's too far-fetched, okay? What do you think George Soros's goals are? I'm not going to answer the question for you. What do you think he's all about? Why do you think he just spent $18 billion in radical causes? I think you know the answer, and you got to pay attention. Many of your brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ are completely asleep. You got to pay attention. Okay, that's your job, just like it's my job. That's why we were called from the foundation of the world to be here for such a time as this. And it's not to be asleep in a time of spiritual battle. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. We'll be back in a moment. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire, and this is part 3 in our emergency prophetic alert for America. And this is a very serious prophetic alert, or as we call an emergency apocalyptic alert for America. We had part 1, we've done part 2, and this is part 3. Why? Because there is a convergence of factors that may begin on November 4th that will constitute what's called a series of manufactured crises with the intended end game of creating a level of chaos in our nation that's unprecedented, so that certain powers can call for the establishment of martial law. If and when that happens, that's it. We've lost America. Because a nation that is under martial law is a police state. The Constitution ceases to exist. The Bill of Rights ceases to exist. And that way they get to cheat and install their one world socialist government in Washington, D.C., which they've been lusting to do for a long time. Now, we can avoid that. I'm very serious about this. This is not fatalism. We can avoid that if we understand the nature of the battle that we're fighting, the purpose and the intention of the enemy, and what our true weapons are, which are not physical weapons, they're spiritual weapons. And we have to understand, and I just sent out a Facebook post just before recording today's program. The goal of the radical groups, the goal of the media, the goal of certain politicians, the goal of ISIS, the goal of MS-13, the goal of Antifa and other groups, is they are going to hold these protests, riots, and demonstrations, okay? You need to brace yourself for it. They're going to do everything they can to anger conservatives, law-abiding people, Christians, people who believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, people who are patriotic to America. They're going to do methodically everything they can to get you to lose your temper, to get you to be angry, and to get you to succumb to an emotional state so that you're not thinking rationally. If they can get you into that emotional state, they've got you off balance, and they can accomplish their end game. Now, let me spell out what I mean by that. They are going to do everything. They're going to use language and words. They're going to burn American flags. They're going to call Trump supporters this or that. They're going to do horrible things, okay? They're going to use every psychological means and physical means at their disposal to incite violence and to incite a reaction in normally law-abiding, peaceful people. Okay? That's the game plan. That's the purpose of a manufactured crisis. But hear this, and this is the message you must spread far and wide as fast as you can. And shame on you if you do not spread this message as fast as you can far and wide, because whether or not we still have a free America will largely depend upon what you do in terms of spreading this message. Now, as I've said in part 1, Emergency Apocalyptic Alert for America, and part 2, Emergency Apocalyptic Alert for America, and this program, part 3, an Emergency Apocalyptic Alert for America, I have stated repeatedly that the name of the game is to bait you. It's to seduce you. It's to get you to abandon your reason, become emotional, and to seduce you through psychological factors to become physically engaged in their conflict. You got it? Their game is to bait you into getting physically engaged in their conflict. If you succumb to the seduction and get physically engaged in their conflict, if you bite the bait and get physically involved or engaged in the conflict, you lose. Do you understand? That's what they want. All they want is for you to get physically engaged in the conflict. Once they do that, they have ensnared you. They have trapped you. Don't deceive yourself into thinking you're going to get out. You're not going to get out because they control the media. And this is how it will play out. Patriotic people, conservatives, Christians, whatever, people who are pro-America from whatever racial group or ethnic group, they're going to be baited. They're going to be at a concert or something. Something will happen. And they're going to be called names. They're going to be attacked. And they're going to have every single justification necessary. The people that are for America, the people who believe in America, the Christians, so on and so forth, will be fully justified in a human sense, in standing up for what they believe and physically engaging the people who are acting like bullies and trying to take away their freedoms. They will have every moral justification necessary. However, if they make the mistake and act on that moral justification, even though they're morally justified for physically engaging, they are entering a quicksand trap that is intended to bring them down and to bring this nation down. Do you understand what I'm saying? You have to communicate this far and wide to as many people as possible. You have to educate them. They have to get it. Okay, this is the way this scenario is going to play out. There will be very emotionally explosive, perhaps violent demonstrations across the country. People who are conservatives or whatever are going to be attacked, belittled, challenged, mocked, and incited. There may be violence done, okay, awful violence conducted by these people. And the violence is being done to challenge those that are patriotic and believe in America to respond. Now, you have to be on your guard. Listen to what I'm saying. I know what I'm talking about. The time for playing games is over. The time for being a little kid is over. You need to listen. This is how it's going to go down. You need to spread it far and wide. You need to educate people. There will be voices that arise in the mainstream media. There will be voices that arise in the cultural realm, in the political realm. And by cultural realm, I mean music, singers, and actors and stuff. And most importantly, listen very carefully, most importantly, there will be voices that arise within the conservative counterculture, within the alternative culture, within the alternative right culture, within the patriotic culture, within the Christian culture, within the pro-American, pro-Trump culture. There will be voices that arise that are going to tell you that it is at this time that you need to change your strategy. These voices, some of them are going to be well-known names. Mark my words. Some of them are going to be well-known leaders in the conservative movement or, Christian movement or whatever. There are going to be well-known names that are going to be inciting you and saying, this is the final straw. We need to show a show of force. We need to physically make them back down. We need to engage them and say enough is enough and put a stop to it. Okay, are we on the same track here? Those voices that are telling you to engage these forces of manufactured crisis, they are going to give you an impeccable reason why you need to engage them and why you have to engage them now or you're going to lose your country, okay? They will have a very tightly crafted argument. Listen to me. If you make the mistake of listening to voices within conservative circles or Christian circles or right circles that are telling you to physically engage with these people, that is not the voice of wisdom. I don't care how famous and influential that person is. That is a voice that if you obey that voice, if you heed the advice of that voice, if you make the fatal mistake of physically engaging these people, that will be the most fatal mistake you will ever do. This is the warning. You can't allow yourself to be coerced by people that may have names that are pushing you towards confrontation. You have to disengage. You cannot allow yourself to be seduced. You cannot allow yourself to be pulled into a physical engagement. Do you understand? And you need to spread this message far and wide. Why? Why do you need to guard yourself against the physical engagement? You need to guard yourself against physical engagement because that's what the elite really want. They want you to physically confront these people because they know, no matter how careful you are, there will be violence, there will be shooting, there will be death, there will be chaos. And even if it doesn't occur naturally, listen carefully, it will occur through strange and mysterious ways. And I think you know what I'm talking about. You do not have control over those environments. So everybody you know can be peaceful and law-abiding, and you think, well, we're engaging in a peaceful and law-abiding manner. And yes, you are. But all of a sudden, as the news cycle goes on, there are people who were killed and murdered in relationship to your group. And you know for a fact that it was nobody in your group. But hey, you can't take it back because some other invisible hand was involved. You cannot engage. You don't control the media environment. The mainstream media will do everything it can to fuel the flames. They will distort, they will lie, they will video what they want to video, they will ignore the truth. They are whores. They are propagandists. They are not to be trusted. If you trust them, you're a fool. You have to watch out for fake conservatives and fake everything else. This is a time to be circumspect, to walk circumspectly, to look where you're going before you walk. And this is not the time to be seduced by manufactured crisis or manufactured chaos. If you allow yourself to be seduced, if you allow yourself to bite the bait, you're going to enter into an inevitable whirlpool of destruction that will ultimately lead to a police state, a declaration of martial law to control the chaos, which is exactly what the elite want, and it's exactly what they're betting on, and it's exactly why they're doing this to begin with. Do you understand that? These demonstrations, should they come on November 4th, if they come on December 4th, who knows when they're going to come. Whenever they come, they will be coming. In the same time frame, there's going to be, when there's confusion, when there's these demonstrations, when people's emotions are high, the media is going to release information regarding hearings and investigations. Listen carefully. The timing is very conspicuous. While these demonstrations and manufactured crisis and all kinds of crazy things are going down, all of a sudden the media, working with political operatives, will release information that is designed to pour gasoline on the fire and make it go explosive. All of a sudden, you'll find out about the deviousness and the lies and the corruption, and your temptation will be to go berserk. Don't yield to the temptation. Don't bite the bait. Don't allow yourself to be seduced. The one thing that I'm saying in every one of these prophetic alerts is what I just told you. But here's the challenge. We need to reach millions of people with this message and this warning about not biting the bait as fast as we can. So you need to take a part in this, because I can't do it by myself. You need to make the messages go viral. The programs I've done explaining it, make them go viral. Okay? Make them go viral. Make the Facebooks, the YouTubes, everything, make it go viral. Because if we don't make it go viral, if we don't reach millions of people, there are going to be a disturbing number of people that are going to get trapped and seduced, and they'll bring the whole thing down. Got it? Now, that is why, with Paul McGuire Ministries and Paradise Mountain Church, we have crossed a very important river, so to speak. We now have entered a period where we must communicate to millions and millions of people every day. And the only way we can do that is to launch our broadcast television studio, to use visuals, to visually live stream this radio program, the Paul McGuire Report, to live stream the prophetic teaching at Paradise Mountain Church. By the way, we have a Paradise Mountain Church meeting, a powerful one. The Lord has given me a powerful word for America, and there will be a time of powerful prayer. There is no excuse for you not attending. In a time of spiritual crisis like this, I can't imagine what your excuse would be. Make a sacrifice, for crying out loud, and come and pray and show up and be somebody that makes themselves available to the Lord, or bring people that you know are hungry for the Lord. November 17th, Friday, in North Hollywood. Visit paulmcguire.us for the map and the instructions. It's free, but you got to register. In my hands is Conquering the Matrix. It is 342 pages. This book will give you the information. It's fast-moving, it's high-powered, it's biblically based, it relies on Bible prophecy, it will I don't have words for what this book will do. It will enable you to conquer this matrix of lies and illusions that's being wrapped around your head through technology. You need to buy it. You need to educate yourself and educate others. All of my books are not written just to tantalize one person. You got to spread it far and wide, because people are dumbed down. And the only way we can be victorious is through knowledge. Knowledge is power. Get yourself a copy of Conquering the Matrix. Get yourself a copy of A Prophecy of the Future of America, where that book was written in when? The copyright is 2013, and I talk about the very plans that are going on now, manufactured crisis, and its purpose in creating a new world order. That's what this is all about. Read my book, Mass Awakening, because in Mass Awakening, I talk about the fact that America is either going to experience a satanic mass awakening or a Christian or biblical mass awakening, depending upon one force, the Church of Jesus Christ. And coming up in January, Trumpacalypse, there's an entire agenda going on with that I can't talk about now. But I will say this, I need your prayers. Have to have your prayers. Have to have your prayers. There's no way we can accomplish what we've set out to accomplish without prayer warriors praying for me, my family, and the various things that we're doing. And I need people to seek the Lord and ask the Lord, Lord, how can I help Paul McGuire Ministries and Paradise Mountain Church with how much do you want me to contribute? How much do you want me to donate financially? And then whatever the Lord tells you to do, do. And I am so thankful just in the last 2 weeks, because we're trying to cross a threshold with our fundraising, and now we're really starting to get in striking distance, which means we're going to be able to launch stuff soon, depending upon how fast the rest of the funding comes. But I've been so encouraged because I've had people in the last 2 weeks, and I know it's God. They went before the Lord and they asked God what to do, and I don't want to give away their situation. But both of these people obeyed the Lord. The Lord spoke to them to do something that was different than they normally do, and that really helped us. And one person, and I don't want to give away the specifics, they did something totally out of the box. And I don't want to share what they did because I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to manipulate them. They just listened to the Lord, and the Lord told them to do something, and it really is helping us. So this way we can get our studio at least presentable and reach the millions of people necessary. Look, the battle is raging. This past year and more, ever since Trump got elected, they've tried to impeach the guy. I mean, you realize this. This has nothing to do with Republicanism or pro-Trump or anti-Trump. We've never had a president in the history of the United States who, before he got elected, they tried to kick him out of the election. And then from the moment he became president up until the present time, they have done everything in their power through lying, by the way, through absolute lying, to impeach the guy on false information. And even though Mueller, former head of the FBI, has found nothing on Trump after all this time, you would think he would apologize to the American people. And you think he'd have the integrity to say, after spending countless millions of dollars in investigating Trump like nobody's ever been investigated before, he's clean as a whistle. You'd think he'd have some integrity. No, he has no integrity. No integrity whatsoever. You know why he doesn't have any integrity? Because apparently, to what degree, I don't know, and I don't know if it's substantiated, so I have to be careful about what I say. But there were a lot of very powerful political figures that were right in the heart, not of a fake Russian collusion, but you can see the pictures of Hillary Clinton with well-known political leaders selling uranium, which is used to make nuclear bombs, to the Russians. So who was really in collusion with the Russians? Hillary Clinton and the DNC. And supposedly, one of these big-time investigators was the bag man for it. So why are they allowed to do this? And what is it with this Jeff Sessions guy? I don't get it. I don't know. Maybe some of you know more about who Jeff Sessions is than I do. But I look at the guy, this is my impression, and I could be wrong. I see a guy who screams compromised, that they have something on him, and he's compromised, and he's afraid of acting. He pretended to be, in order to get the job, this great conservative, this great champion of constitutional values. And yet, the President of the United States has been attacked unjustly on so many fronts. I don't see this Jeff Sessions guy as defending anything aggressively. He's like a doormat. What is he doing there? I'm serious. What is he doing there? Okay, he's like Inspector Clouseau. I'm serious. Now, I'm willing to be corrected, but right now I'm looking at Inspector Clouseau guarding Donald Trump. That's not a good thing. I'm looking at a Republican Party that is so corrupt, I could barf. You know why they're corrupt? You know why Bill Clinton and Obama and George W. Bush were all laughing and hugging each other and like good old boys? You know why? This is just the picture was taken just like a couple of weeks ago. Why? You know why? Because they're all globalists. They all work for the globalists. They all are selling out the country. So, of course, they're on the same team. The only person who is not on that team is Donald Trump. Despite his imperfections, of which he has many, it's Donald Trump. Okay? I'm not saying he doesn't have imperfections. Believe me, he does. Okay, so Troy Anderson and I have a book coming out. You need to pray for it. It's coming out in January 2018 from Apocalypse. The book will be, Lord willing, and with your prayers, the ultimate game changer, because it will inform conservatives and Christians as to why the hand of God, despite his imperfections, is on Donald Trump, and why God found it necessary at this time in America's history to supernaturally intervene in our nation, because that's what's going on right now. You understand that, right? You understand that. Are we all up to speed on that? Right now, America is in such a grave situation, and has been in such a grave situation, that by all logical accounts, America should have collapsed into a totalitarian state and had a major financial crisis. That's how deeply entrenched our problems are. There's no way of making this sound sweet. That's the truth, okay? The only thing that kept America from hemorrhaging, and by the way, how did America get into the position of having its economy sabotaged, of having the income of the middle class slashed and the working class slashed, and 80,000 manufacturing plants moved overseas? How did America get into that position? In my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017, which is a completely different book than A Prophecy of the Future of America. In the book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017, I deal primarily with economics, trade treaties, the middle class, outsourcing. None of these topics are new for me because I've been dealing with them for 30 years. Okay? And I dealt with them 30 years ago in copyrighted books. I have them right here in the studio. And every time I would bring up the subject of a trade treaty at a prophecy conference, or the North American Union at a prophecy conference, I would be attacked. Christian media would attack me. Christians would attack me. Everybody would attack me. Do I care? No, I don't care. I don't care if you attack me. Do you really think? I don't want to sound like I'm arrogant, but do you really think? You really think I care what you think? I mean, on a human level, yeah, I care what you think. Those of you that I know are my partners and friends, I care what you think. But do you really think I care what people think who attack me when I'm telling them, when I'm writing a book on the truth or communicating the truth, and they're making accusations against me for based on complete lies? Do you think, listen to me, just friend to friend, do you really think I care what they think? I don't. You know why I don't? I don't want to bore you with the same old story, but I'm going to. When I was in third grade, I was so concerned about what people thought at that time in my life that I would literally have nightmares at night that I would accidentally go to school and put on two different color socks. So I was so concerned about what people thought about me that I'd have nightmares every night before going to school. And at that period in my life, and for quite a few years later, I, like most young men, was very, very concerned about what people thought about me. Did I have the right haircut? Was, the whole deal. Okay? I don't know when it happened. It happened before I became a Christian, but I made a decision. I just got sick of living that way. I got sick of giving other people the power to make me feel good or bad about myself, especially when the people I was giving this power to make me feel good or bad about myself didn't know what they were talking about, like 99% of the time. And so, when you write books, everybody thinks, oh, it's great when you write books. Well, it depends what kind of books you write. If you write Christian books and Bible prophecy books, you're going to be attacked by a lot of people. So I wrote my first prophecy book and I was attacked. And then I was always attacked writing prophecy books because from Christians who would accuse me of lying. I'm sure I'll be accused of lying in my latest book, Conquering the Matrix. Every book I've written, I've been accused of lying. I'm not talking about lying about some obscure sentence, about lying about the whole thing, that this is like a complete fabrication. Well, the only problem is I know that I'm telling the truth because I've done my homework, I've educated myself, I've spent thousands and thousands of hours researching, gaining documentation from mainstream credible sources. So I actually happen to know what I'm talking about. So back in the year 2000, when I was going around telling people that the reason, no, it was before 2000, I brought all my books into the studio so I could show you the copyrights to prove that I was talking about trade unions and North American unions back in the 1990s, but it's too far away. I'm not going to walk away from the microphone. So starting in the 1990s, early 1990s, 1991, 1989, I was talking about trade unions, the North American Union, so on and so forth. And I was warning that the purpose of the North American Union, and by the way, when I brought up the subject North American Union, everybody accused me of lying, of making up a conspiracy theory. They said, Paul, you're a liar. No, these are spirit-filled Christians. So, if you want to understand my psychological profile, that's how I became to be what I became to be. When you get attacked by spirit-filled Christians, I'm going to let it all hang out for just a moment, and then I'll probably regret it. Who are professors at a major university, a Christian university. Now, in defense, they did not, to my face, call me a liar. They communicated that in other ways. So they said I was lying. that there was no such thing as the North American Union, which I wrote about in my books, like Who Will Rule the Future, and many other of my earlier prophecy books, like Countdown to Armageddon and stuff. They said I was making up this entire thing. It was a complete fabrication and lie on my part. There was no such thing as the North American Union. So I wrote a book called Are You Ready?, which became a bestseller. And I talked about the North American Union. I talked about the trade treaties. And I gave proof and documentation that the trade treaties existed for the purpose of doing an end run around the Constitution and making America part of a one world government and a one world economic system and a one world religion. And then I talked about the fact that part of this plan involved creating a North American Union, which consisted of unifying Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Now, even though the book was a bestseller, Are You Ready? And it's in all my other books, I was accused of lying and making it up. Well, I wasn't lying and making it up because I gave irrefutable proof. My documentation came from the Council on Foreign Relations' actual website, and it came from a report printed on the Council on Foreign Relations website called Building a North American Community, which was published in 2005, where they document the North American Union and the real reason for the trade unions. See? So I don't really care what people think. If I have done my homework properly and I'm speaking the truth, I really don't care if somebody comes along, Christian or non-Christian, and accuses me of lying and making stuff up. I don't care because it's irrelevant to me. Because they obviously have done no homework and they're living in their own little matrix world of a lie. So when I wrote A Prophecy of the Future of America 2016-2017, I talked about the percentages of financial loss from the working class and the middle class before Trump was even talking about this stuff. Why? Because, you see, the Lord impressed upon my heart, you can't understand Bible prophecy unless you understand the mystery of the economic system. And so I began to teach that. Now, getting back to what's happening in America. And, there will be some people who will say this isn't true, it's a conspiracy theory, but that's their problem. All of the crisis you're watching, all of the trade treaties, all of the behavior of the presidents and the intelligence agencies, all of the attacks on Trump that are unprecedented, all of the planned riots from ISIS and Antifa and the stuff financed by George Soros, all of the manufactured chaos, everything you're seeing is a kind of virtual reality. In fact, it is, listen carefully, this is not, a conspiracy theory, this is a fact. Everything that you're allowing yourself to receive in your consciousness by plugging your mind into this matrix of laptops and earbuds and cell phones and movies and social media and stuff, all of that is designed as a mass mind control paradigm. Do you understand that? That's what it is. That's what the matrix is. The matrix is. It was popularized by the filmmakers, and the word has been used by a lot of people. But the matrix is essentially a giant artificial reality. And its purpose is it is a control system. And I explain this in the new book, Conquering the Matrix. It's a control system. Right here, I'm reading from Conquering the Matrix. And the chapter is called Understanding the Matrix Control System. Now listen to this. This goes back to the year 1928 and 1931. Now, these Fabian socialists of Great Britain were these intellectual leaders from the elite families. Their game plan, and by the way, they pretended to be atheists, but they were secretly involved in New Age religions and mysticism. They were very powerful men: Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, John Maynard Keynes. And H.G. Wells, who was the former head of British intelligence, but also a science fiction author who wrote The Invisible Man and Invaders from Mars and The Island of Dr. Moreau, etc. H.G. Wells also wrote nonfiction books such as The New World Order in 1940 and The Open Conspiracy, Blueprints for a World Revolution, which H.G. Wells wrote in 1928. That's a long time ago, isn't it? In 1931, that's a long time ago. I want you to listen carefully to what Aldous Huxley wrote in 1931. Aldous Huxley would write about a wirehead population where the goal was to microchip the global population and plug them into a global control matrix. Okay, so as far back as 1931, Aldous Huxley was calling for a wirehead population. That's a strange term, but he wrote about it in 1931. And as far back as 1931, these intellectual scientists that were planning the New World Order were calling for and had the goal to create a microchip that would allow them to control the global population and plug them into a global control matrix. That's in 1931. So these people have been planning this revolution that's going on right before our eyes since the 1800s. Okay? Now, this is what you have to understand. And it takes me, Conquering the Matrix is like 342 pages. You have to understand that when I was talking to you about the movie Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson and how he was a Manchurian candidate and he was brainwashed, okay, you have to understand that all of the technologies and techniques that cause an individual to be programmed and undergo mass mind control through pain, drugs, hypnosis, the same principles, and I outline this in my book, Conquering the Matrix, the same exact principles can be used on a mass population or an entire nation. So, let's spell out a scenario for you, okay? Let's go back to the 70s in America, which the 70s in America was subjected to a mass mind control operation. Now, review this quickly with me. What was the collective trauma, shock, and pain that the counterculture generation, the 60s generation, all experienced together? Two things. The major thing was watching John F. Kennedy's head, the president, get blown to bits on national television. That was deep shock, deep psychological pain for an entire generation. And the endless pictures of the body bags coming back from Vietnam and so many people who they loved, they died in Vietnam. That was pain. It was shock. That is a prerequisite for mass mind control. Then drugs. We say, well, how did drugs come into the picture? Okay, this may be before your time, but I want you to revisit the 60s and the 70s. Immediately after JFK was assassinated, his head blown off, riding in an open limousine on national television. Immediately after that, figures such as Dr. Timothy Leary from Harvard began promoting and distributing massive doses of LSD, the most powerful psychedelic drug known to mankind, and the most powerful mind control drug known to mankind. The Grateful Dead, the Beatles, the Ken Kesey, the guru of the Grateful Dead, all the big rock and roll groups were promoting the use of LSD to the mass culture. And mysteriously, millions and millions of doses of free LSD were distributed at rock concerts, on the streets, on college campuses, and an entire generation was turned on to acid, the most powerful psychedelic drug ever known to mankind. So now you have pain, drugs, and now the final thing is hypnosis. Go back in time with me. It's in Conquering the Matrix in detail. What would constitute hypnosis? We've established pain during the counterculture. We've established the mass distribution and usage of LSD. Now, what would be hypnosis? I'll tell you what hypnosis would be. Repetitive messages, repetitive words, repetitive lyrics that tens or hundreds of millions of young people would hear over and over again. So all of the hit songs from the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, Mamas and Papas, they all had catchy little lyrics, okay, that contained both a subconscious meaning and a conscious meaning. The way the music industry, listen very carefully and you'll learn a lot. The way the music industry was structured at that time, people heard rock and roll with the lyrics first primarily on AM stations and then on AM and FM stations. What soon happened with AM and FM stations is that they would play all across the country, no matter where you drove, no matter what city you were in. You would listen to the same hit list of, the biggest selling albums or songs. So no matter what radio station you went to, you basically hear the same exact list of hits. Maybe in a different order, but every day you'd hear the same list of hits no matter where you were in the country, no matter what different radio station you tuned into. And it would change every once in a while. People would climb in the charts. So what does that mean? It means that you have hundreds of millions of people listening to AM and FM stations who are hearing, let's say it's 15 super hits, at any given time. They're hearing repetitively, no matter where you are across the country, no matter what radio station you're listening to, you're hearing a hit parade or whatever they want to call it, that consists of about 15 songs in rotation. So you're hearing the specific lyrics of just 15 songs over and over and over and over and over again for a month, and then it'll be a new rotation, and there'll be some changes, and then it's the same 15 songs over and over and over again, okay, with catchy little lyrics. What that does is it codifies and it organizes this. It organizes a massive distribution system where hundreds of millions of young people are listening to the exact same series of rock and roll and pop songs with the exact same series of lyrics. The lyrics are designed to communicate messages to a person's conscious mind and subconscious mind. Now, so we have the shock, the trauma of the mind, the Vietnam War, the deaths. We have JFK getting blown to bits. We have Robert Kennedy getting blown to bits. We have Martin Luther King getting blown to bits. Pain, psychological pain. And so we have LSD being freely distributed. Who is paying for millions and millions of doses of free LSD to be distributed? Because LSD, that's freely being distributed by Timothy Leary, the Grateful Dead, the Beatles, and everybody else, LSD just happens to be the #1 Manchurian candidate MK-Ultra mind control drug developed by the Nazi mind control scientists at the end of World War II. Let me say that again. The same drug that everybody's using on college campuses, the same drug they're using in rock and roll concerts, the same drug being promoted by all kinds of rock and roll groups and Timothy Leary and others, the same drug that mysteriously is being distributed in millions and millions of doses for free. I remember, I was alive back then. You didn't pay for LSD. There was always somebody distributing it free. Why? Who paid for it? Okay? And that same drug, LSD, just happens to be the most powerful mind control drug known to mankind that is used by the CIA and the German mind control scientists in MK-Ultra and Manchurian candidate operations. You see any parallels? Okay, now, the final part is when you play the same songs or the same hit parade or the same hit tunes of 15 rock and roll pop songs every day, over and over again, you're exposing hundreds of millions of young people to repetition. Repetition is the key to brainwashing and scientific mind control. So over and over again, they're hearing the same lyrics every day. But over and over again. And some of the lyrics go into the subconscious mind, some of the lyrics go into the unconscious mind. But the problem is they're programming people just like mind control is supposed to. Now, let's review the basic formula of scientific mind control. We have shock or extreme pain. We outline what that was. We have the use of powerful mind control drugs like LSD. It's being distributed everywhere for free, all across America. So everybody's high on LSD or pot or whatever it is. They're high on drugs, mind-altering drugs. They've already had shock and trauma, and now they're being programmed through the methodical repetition over and over again of conscious and subconscious lyrics. Okay, you say, well, what does that mean? I'm going to tell you what it means. You need to read Conquering the Matrix because I go into it in depth, as well as a prophecy of the future of America. What it means is when we began the 1960s counterculture, which means when we were still in the 1950s and the early 60s, America and America's youth was basically a Christian nation with largely Christian values and precepts, okay? Yeah, there was lots of hypocrisy, but the basic consensus was Christian thought, marriage, virginity, sexual restraint, Jesus, churches, patriotism. That was the consensus, okay? No matter where you went. When the 60s begin, with the assassination of JFK, you have trauma to the mass mind. Then you have the circulation of psychedelic drugs like LSD. Then you have repetitive lyrics over and over again. That's the basic classical formula for brainwashing: pain, drugs, hypnosis. What happens after hundreds of millions of young people go through the process of shock or pain, LSD, and endlessly repetitive lyrics? What is the end result? At the late 50s, early 60s, the culture was Christian, Bible, marriage, patriotism, pro-America, right? For those of you that remember, yes, that's the way it was. Within a span of about 7 or 8, 9 years, due to pain, drugs, and hypnosis and repetitive lyrics, subconscious and conscious, you see a 180-degree transformation in the culture. The culture is now, by the time we reach the 70s at some point, the culture is New Age, anti-Christian. There's been a sexual revolution. We don't believe in nationalism or patriotism anymore. We believe in globalism. And the youth have become pagan. They're into the New Age or witchcraft or whatever. Sexual revolution. The entire American society and system has been 180 degrees turned up on its head. You think that was an accident? Obviously it wasn't. You need to read Conquering the Matrix and Mass Awakening. It was a deliberate, systematic mass mind control operation. Now, here we are today. We have other things going on today. And we're going to do a part 4 of this emergency prophetic alert. This is part 3 of Emergency Apocalyptic Alert for America, where we've explained critical dynamics. Don't think for a moment that the manufactured crisis you're watching on television is not part of a psychological operation, a mass mind control operation. Don't think that the chaos is just chaos. You don't have to have people on drugs like LSD anymore, because half the population is taking legal psychiatric drugs, and through EMF waves, which many people don't understand, but I explain it in Conquering the Matrix, can produce the same intensity in terms of altered states of consciousness as LSD can. Okay? So you don't need to take a pill of orange sunshine or acid. EMF waves can actually change your consciousness as radically as LSD did. And repetition, there is subliminal repetition everywhere on the internet, social media, music, and television. So the mass mind control operation is still fully functional. The key is, will you bite the bait and be seduced by it? And on that, I'm going to leave you with the warning of a watchman. I need your help in getting this word out. I need your help to get this information and to get people up to speed and to educate them as fast as I possibly can. So I'm asking you to pray prayerfully, go before the Lord and ask him what you can do to help us get this message out very fast. And simply do whatever he tells you to do when you go to him in prayer. And then remember to pray for me, my family, and this ministry. This is a spiritual battle, and we are to use spiritual weapons. Again, don't bite the bait and get engaged physically. Our warfare is mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. It's a spiritual warfare. Thank you for listening. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. And make sure you spread this message far and wide. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire.